Brandon in Ackworth, Georgia. Great to have you on the EIB network. Hello.
Hey, Russ. Great to be on your show. I've been listening to you for a long time. This is my first time actually getting through.
Well, I'm glad you made it. Thank you.
All right. Well, the point I wanted to make is this. We've seen all the people like Jimmy Carter, Howard Dean talking about these terrorists and how they're not really Islamic. You know, Howard Dean went so far as to call them cultists, not even Islamic cultists, but just cultists. So my question is, why is the U.S. government giving these people that we detain Korans, prayer rugs, halal meals, and all the meals that conform to Islam?
Hey, you're not supposed to ask that. You're not supposed to bring that up. You're not.
Well, inquisitive minds want to know.
Well,
yeah, it seems to me that the left want it both ways.
If they're not Islamists, why are they demanding Korans, right?
Right.
And if they're not Islamists, why do they need prayer rugs?
So when these guys commit their acts of terrorism, they're not Islamic and in no way represent Islam. But when they're detained, they are Islamic and absolutely must be afforded everything their religion requires.
Absolutely right. Which, to me, asks another question. Why is it these names you mentioned, Howard Dean and whoever else, but he's not alone. You can pick any Democrat. Why? Honestly now. Why are these Democrats who are saying this so insistent that these terrorists not be thought of as Islamic when they clearly are? Your question is great illustration of that. They demand prayer rugs, they demand the Quran, and all the prayers at the right times of day. And they're granted all of it. Dietary conditions, those requests are met. Yet they're not Islamists. Clearly they are. So why is it so important for Howard Dean and whoever, why is it so important that we not believe this? Why do they not want to believe it? That's what intrigues me. And we can all provide answers. We can all come up with possibilities. They're either afraid to intimidate them, or alternatively, and don't discount this, Islamic in front of terrorism discredits it. There's nobody tolerant of Islamic terrorism. But if they're just a bunch of cultists, I think you could say that I think in the modern day Democrat Party, and I've thought about this, and I've referenced it in roundabout ways during campaign years. But I think in the Democrat Party, you know and I know, that in their world, the United States is and has been the destabilizing force in the world. Be it our superpower status, be it our large economy, be it our racism, be it our bigotry, be it our exclusionary policies, whatever. There's a large segment of the Democrat Party and its voting base that considers the United States the problem in the world. We don't liberate, we conquer. We force ourselves on people, and we steal resources from these countries that we supposedly are liberating and defending. We take them their oil, we take their minerals, we take everything. We steal it, and people get rich. And the Democrat Party is just infested with people who do not believe the United States is good for the world. Well, if a bunch of people over here in Yemen think the same thing, well, there's a bond. I've always, and I've made mention of this before, I have always, and I'm not just trying to be funny with this or be jocular, make a joke about it. I think it's always stunned me when I listen to somebody like Mahmoud Ahmadinejad criticize the United States and then listen to a Democrat presidential candidate criticize the U.S., and it's almost identical. And if there's a Republican president involved, I know that, when Mahmoud Ahmadinejad rips into George W. Bush, or when Hugo Chavez did it, they sounded like Democrats criticizing Bush. They sound like Democrats criticizing America. I always said to myself, my gosh, if I were a Democrat, I'd be embarrassed. These reprobates sound just like me, or I sound just like them. But it clearly didn't bother them, didn't stop. And, you know, politics makes strange bedfellows. And if you are of a mindset that your country is the problem in the world, no matter how illegitimate or legitimate your view, no matter how insane, stupid, whatever you are, if you believe that, if you really believe your country is the problem of the world, and then some group of malcontents come along, like Al-Qaeda or like militant Islam, and think the same thing, well, there's a little bond of agreement there. And maybe you don't want to upset that bond. So when Howard Dean and these guys, don't call them Islamists, there's a parenthesis. You know, they may be right about some things. We don't want to discredit these people. They're just, you know, the Islamists are not the problem. These cultists are. Do you see or hear from Democrats routinely? Do you see words, speeches, TV appearances detailing how we need to wipe these people out? You really don't, do you? What we hear is criticism of how we're trying to. But we don't hear stem winders, barn burners. We don't see fist pounding from Democrats about how this threat's got to be dealt with. We must take care of this. There's no Churchills out there. And, of course, Churchill was alone, too. You know, Churchill identifying the Nazis for the Brits, 1938, 39, 40. They all thought he was the kook, that Chamberlain was the brilliant. Churchill, perhaps the greatest statesman in 200 years, before the peak of his Renaissance, was considered an absolute lunatic for thinking what he thought about Hitler, for thinking what he thought about Islamists. He properly identified them way back in the 1800s. I've been doing a lot of reading on Churchill lately. But he was way ahead of the class on virtually everything, but especially on Hitler. And nobody wanted to believe it, and so they didn't. So Churchill ends up being castigated as a kook, warmonger, I mean, you name it. Well, today, the evidence clear who the warmongers are and who the terrorists are, and we've got, I mean, the voices that stand up and say, no, you can't say that about, they're all Democrats. And it was right about communists, too. Famous Iron Curtain speech at Fulton, Missouri. That's where he gave the Iron Curtain speech. State of Missouri, Fulton University. Or not Fulton University, it was in Fulton, Missouri. And 2 days before that, he was in Miami, made a speech, the predecessor for it. Oh, he had the communists nailed. He had them nailed way, way back in the 30s as well. But the point is that it's not just today that people who correctly identify things are considered oddballs, kooks. Churchill was, too. And he's perhaps just the greatest living Brit there's ever been, in many people's view. But it just strikes me that here we are in the middle of Islamist, militant, violent Islamist death, bombings, attacks, and there are people standing up almost immediately saying, don't criticize them. And they're almost all Democrats doing it. So I, naturally curious, say, why? What is, something has to explain it. What is it? I don't know. Got to take a time out. I just saw the clock. Sit tight. We'll be right back.